And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC basketball podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. In this fourth segment, I'm going to continue on with my list of the top free agents going into the NBA offseason and their potential, what's probably going to happen to them, where they're going to end up going, things of that nature. So I am going to, continue on with this list and just go. Hold on just one second. Let me just try and find the. Oh, I don't have him on here. That's insane. Well, that's my bad. One of the players that I completely forgot to add on this list was you guys are going to be very surprised. It was OG Ananobi. I didn't know that I didn't have him added onto these pages. Hold on, give me 1 second and let me go ahead and put him in here. I'm very surprised that I didn't put him on here. Huh. I really didn't do that. That is horrible on my part. So, anyways, you guys already know who the next player on the list is because, I just completely messed up. So the next player on the list is OG Ananobi. He was recently acquired from the New York Knicks via a trade. Definitely one of the best trades that the Knicks have done in recent history. It was fantastic. It was beautiful. It helped everyone. It made the entire team better, and it just gave good news. It gave great hope for New York. It was perfect example of a trade and the perfect example of a trade that every single New York team should be doing. Brooklyn. And this trade, I'm just before I go on a little rant, um it would have put the Knicks in the conference finals if the Knicks were healthy. I am fully confident on the fact that the Knicks would have made the conference finals if they were fully healthy. Now, he's earning, on his contract, he's earning roughly $20 million a year, 19.9. And like that doesn't really he's obviously like a perfect fit for the New York Knicks, and it doesn't really seem like I don't think that's too much money to pay him, even though there's several other players on the Knicks that definitely do need the money as well. They're also on this list. But I do think that, and not only that, especially since they do want to pursue Paul George, they are going to have to give up some of the players. But I genuinely think OG Ananobi is worth the roster spot, and it's worth all of that money. If they can get, unless getting Paul George is a guarantee, I don't think they should risk losing OG. I definitely don't. He has both the strength and the agility to guard basically anybody. He's 26 years old and he's respectable outside of the three, which is really important, especially like if your main asset is defense. Being a reliable 3-point shooter, it goes a long way. And again, he's just so good on the defense and he's incredibly valuable. I think that New York should try and get him as soon as they can. Now, next player on this list is James Harden. James Harden was a shell of himself than he was in the and I should mention before OG, he had a player option before. He had a player option. So he definitely could accept the player option and play for the Knicks again, and going into the next season, which I really do think is going to be the move for the Knicks. I hope, obviously, he's going to have to accept the player option, but I think that's going to be his best move. So next is James Harden. He also has a player option for the Los Angeles Clippers. This is one of the lowest scoring seasons for James Harden in a while. He is way past his prime and way past definitely not the same player that we remember from previous seasons, dropping 30 points in every single game, dropping triple doubles in every other game, and shooting his step back threes, hitting his step back threes, all of that. Just being the reliable point guard and the shooting guard that he actually was. And this is, despite that, however, this is the first season in the NBA in his entire career where he ended up elevating his play in the postseason as opposed to his play, like compared to his play in the regular season. He shot 40, he shot better from the field in the playoffs. He shot better from 3 in the playoffs as well, and he also ended up scoring more points in the playoffs as well. That is the only thing that's saving him, because one of the biggest stipulations around Harden is the fact that he is one of the worst playoff performers in NBA history. I'm going to go into that segment in another podcast, probably a podcast tomorrow, where I talk about James Harden and how now he is the new leader for the most games played in the postseason without winning a championship. And I'll talk a little bit about that and why it's like his playoff performance has just always been bad. But he has a player option. I wouldn't be surprised if the Clippers take it, especially seeing as like. But the big problem is that if the he might decline it if Paul George doesn't go back to the Clippers. So because James Harden is at that point in his career where he really wants a championship and he wants to win it now. And if he feels that the team isn't good enough to win a championship, he's gone. He's been traded several times recently in the previous years, and the only times where he was happy with the situation he was in was when he was competing for a championship. So that's that. Now the next player on this list is Emmanuel Quickly, and he was traded to the New York Knicks, and he's making $4.2 million right now, but his averages are really good for someone who's making only $4.2 million. 17 points, 43% from the field, 39% from 3, and 85% from the free throw line. And the only problem is that his turnovers were kind of bad in the when he moved over to Toronto. But aside from that, he's been a really good piece for the team. He is going to be a restricted free agent for the Raptors, so I'm pretty sure he's just going to re-sign with them. No big deal. Next player I do want to get into a little bit more is DeMar DeRozan. He is, playing for the Chicago Bulls. He averaged 24 points, 33% from the three-point line, 48% from the field, and 85% from the free throw. I said three-point line with 33%, by the way. And DeMar, he mentioned openness to re-sign with the Bulls, but it's tough to really imagine the 34-year-old returning to Chicago with so many questions surrounding the fact that the Bulls just aren't really a competing team. Like, for the entire time that DeMar has been on the Chicago Bulls, they've been nothing but mediocre. And part of that might have to do with the fact that Zach LaVine keeps getting injured. Part of that might just have to, and the other part might just have to do with the fact that the rest of the players just aren't that good. But DeMar is not really, he has not been the same kind of popular player that he was in Canada with Toronto. And he wasn't, the same. I don't know what it is. It's just like, he's mid. Like, everything about him is just mediocre. And there's, I don't think he should resign. I think he's wasting his time over there. I feel like he should go to a completely different team. His play style is very, very odd and very weird, in my opinion, for this era, because relying on mid-range shots and not being able to hit that efficiently from the three-point line while being a shooting guard is not that ideal. Now, he's gotten better, but, how much is better? Not a lot. So that's all I have for DeMar, and I really feel like he should join a completely different team. Now, next player on this list who I regret is an unrestricted free agent is Claxton. Now, he's going to be an unrestricted free agent. He's one of my favorite players on the team. He averaged 11 points, 9 rebounds, shot 62% from the field. Wasn't a really good free throw shooter, wasn't a really good three-point shooter, but he was a great rebounder, great defender, and, a reliable scorer when you needed him to operate the pick and rolls. It worked out great. Maybe if Cam Thomas wasn't such a ball hog, he'd be able to get more touches. But that's beside the point. Speaking of Cam Thomas, it seemed that Claxton and Cam, they didn't really like click the same way in terms of basketball like visuals. There was a time when Claxton really wanted Cam Thomas to throw him a lob since he was wide open in the paint, but Cam Thomas ended up shooting the three. He ended up making the three, but Claxton was upset, which I don't really understand. If you miss the shot, yes, you can be upset. If you make the shot, I don't feel like you should be upset because you're essentially scoring more points hitting that shot than you were if you were to actually pass the ball, which puts your team in a better position to win. So I don't really agree with the fact that Claxton was, crying at that, but he's 6'11". He is a very valuable center. Now he's not really that buff, but he is relatively lanky for a center, and for his wingspan is really good and it's really long. So I really don't want him to leave the Nets, but I really do feel like that he's not going to try and stay with Brooklyn, given the situation that Brooklyn is under right now, and given the state of where the franchise is. I don't think he's going to want to be a part of this. Next player on this list is Malik Monk. We're now sort of going down to where not the big time player names. We're going down to the mid tier, not really the very good player tier, I guess you could say. The good player tier. That's where we're going into. Before we got in, we were in all-star player tier, and now we're in the good player tier. And you could argue that maybe Quickly and James Harden are in the very good tier because James Harden isn't really an all-star anymore. But regardless, you do what you will with that. Malik Monk, he was in the running for the Sixth Man of the Year, and one of the popular spots that seems to be ringing a bell with Malik Monk is the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now that seems to be a team that is the favorite of acquiring him. Now he didn't win the Sixth Man of the Year, but that doesn't mean that he's not a very valuable player coming off of the bench. He's making $9.9 million this year. He averaged 19 points, 44% from the field, 35% from three, and 5 assists. Again, he was mainly, supposed to be the scorer off the bench. And being such a young player, he's 26 years old, I really feel like he would also be able to mesh relatively well with the other players on the OKC roster. So with that, we are out of time for this fourth segment. So now we will go ahead and we will continue with the fourth segment after this short break, and we will continue talking about the rest of the free agents or the top free agents that are going into the NBA, going into NBA summer and NBA's free agency. And we rattled off 9 players, so now we will go ahead and rattle off a few more players in the final segment. So I will be right back after this break. Be sure to stay tuned.